This is the Sports Hit List by the fans for the fans.
Clearly, Saquon Barkley is chasing history, chasing the Russian record, and he's on the verge of doing that. But the Eagles have nothing to play for, and it's an interesting conversation that I've seen people out here that he may not even play on Sunday. But as a fan, I'm thinking, why is this even a question? I mean, you're chasing a record, you're chasing history, and I understand Saquon's comments, which we're going to get into, where he clearly states that, well, it doesn't matter to him because, they're chasing something bigger. So I guess they're risking injury. But again, this is history. When you're on the verge of history, do you not want to put it's a dicey situation because I guess you can rest versus actually playing a game that can get you over the rushing record. Travis, let me start with you. What are your thoughts here? Do you play and go for the record, or do you, sit out in hopes that for something bigger, which is the Super Bowl?
I think you hit it right on the head. As a fan, it's crazy to think about as a fan. But as the players, like the ultimate goal is always to win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So you want to be the last team holding. You want what's the saying? Isn't it from Moneyball? You want to play in the last play of the season or whatever, something like, you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. But you want to win that. You want to win that Super Bowl. So yeah, that Russian title is nice. I mean, it's cool, and I'm not going to be mad if he play because I think he only needs 101 yards.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not nothing crazy. Like if it was $150, I'd have been like, all right, Saquon, we really about to go out here and risk this. I mean, a quick 101 isn't too bad. I want to know what the situation is with Jalen Hurts if he plays, because that'll help out. But I'm not mad if he sits that, man. If you think the rest, because they're not going to get the number one seed at this point, so that rest might come in handy. You don't want to risk injury going into the playoffs, man, because then that'll just put it like this, Carl. If you get the record and he gets hurt, does that not damper getting the record for you? If you're the player, not as a fan, if you're the player, you get that record, but you get hurt in the fourth quarter and you can't play round one, your team get bumped. How does that make you feel?
Well, you already know how I feel about the word if. That's a conversation. You're an NFL, and this is the thing. But you know what, Travis? These are the things that we talk about when it comes to sports. Injuries are a part of the game. We have to understand that. But again, you're chasing history. That's like LeBron saying, you know what? I'm not going to chase Kareem's. And you're right there. You're right there. You're 100 yards away. You know he's going to get it. And you're kind of saying to us, and yeah, well, and that record has probably been untouchable for years, if not decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been there. So now you're telling me, and again, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but as much as you're right, we want to play for the rings and you want to play for that. But there has to be some there has to be some onus that we're a little bit selfish that I want that record. Mm-hmm. Rick?
Yeah, I agree a lot with you there, Carl. A lot of the things you just said. Now, granted, not to say I don't agree with Travis, right? Because there's always that inherent risk, unfortunately. Every time these guys step out on the field, there is that risk of injury. So we know that already. So it makes sense going into a playoff run where, hey, the past, 2 years now, the Eagles have kind of looked like they should be a potential Super Bowl winner and haven't been able to kind of get over that hump, right? And this is a situation where they've built this team this year, especially bringing Saquon on to kind of get themselves over the hump. So I totally understand having the eyes on the bigger prize, right? But Carl, like you mentioned, this is a record that has been in place for quite some time now, and we haven't seen many people get close to breaking it, right? There's so many different variables in play that we have to look at. There is that factor of, the record itself being one of those that we didn't see potentially being broken anytime soon, especially in an era where it is so pass heavy and we don't see many bell cow, true number one running backs getting the amount of touches and carries that it takes to even come close to this type of record. So you have that aspect. You have the other aspect of the game being against the Giants, right? So how petty do you want to be if you're Saquon Barkley to go out there and get this record against the Giants, right? We already know that Nick Sirianni has a little petty in him, so I can see where some of that may play a factor as well. At the end of the day, me personally, as a fan, whether I was a fan of the Eagles, a fan of Saquon or not, I would want to see him out there trying to break that record. These aren't the types of records that we see get approached often at all, as you can see. I mean, what is it? 9 guys only have ever gone over 2,000 yards, and we haven't seen it in quite some time, especially in this pass heavy era of football that we're in. This is a very, very special record, in my opinion, and I think that the first option, the first thought should be, hey, let's go out there and try to get it right. Because I mean, this is Saquon we talking about. This is the Giants we talking about. He might wrap that thing up in a quarter and a half and be out the game the rest of the way. You know what I'm saying? Like Travis mentioned, it's not 150, it's not 200, it's a buck 01. He could literally get that
It's
in the
100.
first. He could get that in the first quarter, maybe first quarter and a half, first half. Get that one touchdown, whatever it is. There's a touchdown record too, if I'm not mistaken. So me personally, I hope he goes out there. I hope we see him out there at least for a little bit. Now we get into the second half of the game. Let's say he only got 20, 30, 40 yards. Hey, you know what? You gave it your best effort. Maybe at some point you pulled the dogs off, but I'd like to see the effort at least.
Well, Travis, I
Carl,
mean, again, it's been in place for 40 years. 1984 was done by Eric Dickerson. So 40-year record on the line here, and it's hard to say don't go for it, Trav.
I'm not saying don't go for it. I'm just saying be smart about it. That's what I'm gonna sit there and say. Like Rick said, I think it's kind of an evaluation thing of let's see where we are at halftime. Let's go out there, let's give it a solid effort. If we are over 50 yards, 50, 60 yards by halftime, all right, let's go for it. If not, let's not make it a thing. If it's, you know what I mean, like that was seriously.
I have to disagree. Why not? You telling me you're like 40 yards away from breaking a record, and I'm not gonna go for it. Like, again, as a player, I understand I want to win rings, but there has to be some sense of, maybe because I didn't play, but just covering athletes and knowing there's got to be some ego in there and saying, man, I want that shit. Like, I'm going for it. If I'm 40 yards away, coach, don't put me out there. I'm going for this thing that's been in place for 40 years. Let me put my name in NFL history.
I did forget about the Giants aspect of it.
No, against the Giants, the petty part.
I
No,
did forget about that aspect. So that might throw a little fire in my thing. Like, all right, hold on now. But then you got to look at the other aspect of it from a team dynamic. I understand that Saquon is putting it out there like that, because if you look at the season this team's had, they've had a few, malcontents around there. I mean, people, who want the ball. You know what I mean? So I think Saquon is really trying to just lead the charge and say, hey, let's put the team first. You know what I mean? Our bigger goal is the team aspect of winning a Super Bowl. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a lot of factors. I'm not mad if he goes for it. I just want them to be smart about it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say another point too. Like you mentioned, as far as putting the team first, and some of the malcontent that we've seen in that locker room or heard about in that locker room, because you never know what's real and what's not, right?
Right.
I would dare to guess that if you ask every member of that organization, every player in that team, overwhelmingly, the majority of them would tell you that they want to see him break that record. I would imagine that they want this for him. So I go back to the point of, and it gets a little dicey, right? Especially when now we're not talking about an actual injury, but with that injury theme in mind, it gets a little dicey when we say, hey, look, you want to lean on what the player wants to do. But I have always been consistent, as a Dolphin fan, even with the whole Tua situation, right? You want to trust in what the player wants to do. Me personally, if Saquon, granted, in front of the cameras and whatnot and to the public, he's gonna say all the right things. But if he's in that office saying, "Hey, coach, man, I want this thing," he should get a shot at it.
Then go get it.
And there it is.
I'm just thinking about Saquon in terms of some of the things I've seen, over his career, especially this season. I mean, it was a situation. They caught him mic'd up early in the season. It was it might have been the first game against the Giants. He was like, the game was out of hand. He didn't put up his numbers. He was like, man, go let the young dogs get some play time. You know what I mean? So
yeah, because that was a single game record at stake there, if I'm not mistaken, right? He was.
It might have been.
Yeah,
it might. See, he was ready to give up a record right then already. So I mean,
well, again, according to his comments, he said, he understands that this game is not necessary. Something along the lines of, understanding that, they have a goal to win the Super Bowl. But I think deep down inside, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, if I ever played or I have a media record and I'm chasing and I'm right there, I'm going for it. You know, at the end of the day, I'm going to go for all everything in.
And that Giants part of it, again, we don't know how petty Saquon is, but to be jettisoned from that team, to essentially be told, hey, look, we don't think you got it anymore, so we're not going to put up the amount of money that you're worth. Go on to somewhere else and do what you got to do. And somewhere else is a divisional opponent. And oh, by the way, I just happen to have the best running back season anyone's ever seen. That's a massive win, right? One other thing I'll say, we talked about injuries. We mentioned Jalen Hurts. We don't know what the situation is with him. We know how these concussions can go, right? We don't even know for 100% if it's a smart play for the Eagles to necessarily sit their starters. Because God forbid there's any issues with this Jalen Hurts concussion situation. You might want to have Pickett out there getting some more reps with your number ones as well, too. So that's something to kind of keep in mind of considering what ends up happening with Jalen Hurts whenever he's cleared from the concussion protocol.
Well, that being said, we hope to see what the Eagles decide going into this. You guys decide, will Saquon play? Will he not? Like, share, comment, subscribe to all Hit List content.
Thanks for watching the Sports Hit List. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. In fact, do it now.